The park is owned and managed by the trustees of reservations. So we are a nonprofit with a mission to protect for public use properties of exceptional scenic, historic, and ecological value. So the trustees has been overseeing the park, I think, since about 2003. So I'm going to share with you some information I've learned about the park and about the Byrd family. But I should say one of the things I really love about Byrd Park is that so many people have really deep, strong connections to the property, and often those connections are quite long, often intergenerational. There's so many folks I know who just generations of their family have visited and enjoyed the park. So I expect some in this crowd here has knowledge to share that we could all enjoy. And also any stories you have of the park. I love hearing those stories. I often come across people that maybe don't live in the area anymore, but have come back just to visit the park. And often I'll get stories from them or stories from the regulars that really help me appreciate the park more. And it's always just fun to hear.
How many acres in the park?
89 acres.
Thank you.
Park's 89 acres. Okay, so let's get started. So, how many here have visited Byrd Park? I think everyone in the room almost. Okay, great. So that's fabulous. So you probably know a bit about the park, but you may not know that what is Byrd Park was intended initially by the Byrd family to be housing for employees. So this, what you're looking at right now, is a plan of the Neponset Garden Village, which was going to house employees of the Byrd Company. This is 1913 that this plan was created. Just if we take ourselves back to that time, between 1900 and 1910, there's a huge influx of folks into Walpole. These are primarily immigrants that are coming to mostly East Walpole to work in the mills. So in those years, the population of folks that were foreign born, the increase was about 250% of the increase in that population here. So you have this great influx of people coming to work in the area with very limited housing. So it's not surprising that the Byrd family was trying to provide housing for its workers. But we all know that didn't happen. What I should say, though, is they hired for this a man by the name of John Nolan. So also at this time of 1913, Walpole started its first, oh my gosh, what was it called? It's like a civic improvement committee. I think that's the official title. And the civic improvement committee was led by Charles Sumner Byrd Jr. So the Byrd family was involved in that. And they invited John Nolan to come speak, very impressed. And so John Nolan was the one they selected to, design that housing plan. But I want to tell you a little bit about John Nolan. He's a very interesting man, exceptional, and I won't go into great detail. He deserves his own presentation. But I will tell you that he had very humble beginnings. He, just in the education he did have and in his just personal life experiences, he really came to believe that the environment and society were interconnected. I mean, how we design these landscapes really affect the health and well-being of people. So there's a few experiences he had that led him to become a landscape architect. He did attend Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and there he saw the Olmsted exhibit, Frederick Law Olmsted exhibit, which he was very inspired by. And he also read this biography, Charles Eliot, Landscape Architect, and came out in 1902. Charles Eliot, of course, was the founder of the Trustees, and he did lots of other projects around the area, as you know. So John Nolan called that book sacred, so he's quite inspired by that as well. And so in 1903, he attends Harvard School of Landscape Architecture, where Frederick Law Olmsted passed away the same year, 1903. So he studies under Olmsted's son, Olmsted Jr. So he's a landscape architect. He opens his office in Cambridge. He gets work, and he also travels. He goes to England, where he goes to this Letchworth, which was an example of the Garden City movement, which was a movement that was intended, a design movement where it was really for the working class, and it was meant to, usually for a working person, they had a choice between completely agrarian life on the farm, or they had a really, dense city living. And this movement was intended to give the working class the best of both worlds. So it would be an all-inclusive sort of community where green space, agricultural space was definitely very important and part of the design, but it would also offer all the conveniences of city life. So it's supposed to be the best of town and country living. And Nolan, who really had wanted to do social good and believed in how, creating these spaces that would improve the health and well-being of people, really loved this concept. So when he came back, he was really chose to have a focus on planning, which was completely new. There was no town planner, no city planners at this point. The concept of, urban planning or town planning just wasn't around. So he became a leader in town planning. And that's how, he connected to Walpole, and Walpole was this, the Neponset Garden Village was going to be the first example of a garden city movement in the United States. So Nolan was really excited to take that project on and make it happen here in Walpole. And I should say too that the Byrds were very receptive to this idea. They too believed, that the landscape, the land, and how we use it affects the health and well-being of people, and they wanted the best for their workers and the people of Walpole. So as we know, the Neponset Garden Village didn't happen, and that was for a number of reasons. There was a change in the economy, there were increases in construction costs, and then there was the death of their son. So this is Charles Sumner and Anna Byrd. And their son, Francis William, passed away in 1918. And so they decided, instead of the Neponset Garden Village, that they would instead make a memorial park. So This is Nolan, but they kept Nolan as the designer. So this is Nolan's design, 1926 drawing, and the park was definitely intended to be, they called it an outdoor living room. It was supposed to be passive, recreation, a place for people, for their health and well-being again. So this is a quote from John Nolan in his vision for the park. So, a sequestered breathing space in the heart of East Walpole, a combination of broad, sun-swept meadowlands speckled with shadow glades, higher tree-screened knolls for the lover of shade, the whole set to the music of a babbling stream. So that is the vision. It's a very peaceful vision. Now, the Byrd family and Nolan also believed that recreation was a very important part of that vision for the health and well-being of people. And they incorporated a number of recreational opportunities within the park, obviously, but they did not want to have formal organized sports at the park. So at the same time that they were designing the park, they were also designing what is now Ellis Field. And the intention was to have any sort of formal organized sport take place there and have the park as a more peaceful, restful place. So this is a quote from Charles Sumner Byrd. "It is my desire that organized games or sports requiring a playing field shall be excluded from Francis William Park, and that Byrd Athletic Field, which is now Ellis Field, shall be used and developed for the purpose of such games or sports and any other athletic purposes." And of course, Ellis Field is still in use for formal sports. I think it's soccer, mostly. So when Nolan was designing Francis William Park, which is the official name of the park, we added Byrd to honor the Byrd family. So it's Francis William Byrd Park now. But it was designed to mimic different New England landscapes. Again, with the worker in mind, as progressive as the Byrds were, the workers didn't have much opportunity for travel. And so this was designed to give them an opportunity to experience different New England landscapes. So New England Pond, and that would be Willow Pond near the church. New England Meadows, those are sprinkled throughout the park. One of the larger ones probably by the flagpole, for those who've been there. New England Woodland, and that's the section behind the music court. That's a more wooded area of the park. And this is my favorite, New England Seashore. So the pond, sort of by the Washington Street entrance with the frog fountain, that was a swimming pool, as probably most of you know. And but when it was first installed, there was sand at the bottom, sand around the edges. There were seashells there to mimic the New England seashore, and I think that's a fun being nowhere near the ocean, but that's okay. They get the experience, and I hope that some of you have fun stories of the seashore there in the in the park. So I'm just going to show you some photos of the swimming pool and other old photos we have of the park. So as I mentioned, recreation was an important element in the park. It wasn't the formal sports, organized sports, but the swimming pool, the music court, Vista Field, that whole recreational area where the sports courts are, definitely, they wanted that, and it was an important part of the park. So this, I don't know the date on this one, but I'm pretty sure it's in the 20s of the pool. This is from a newspaper. It says at the bottom, quote, "The most popular place in the community is the park swimming pool on a hot afternoon." I should say that I did read Nolan visited the pool. This would be July of 1926. And the pool had a bathhouse, which I'll show you an image of. Some of you probably saw the bathhouse when it was still standing. And how the bathhouse was organized, it could accommodate, I think, about 425 or 450 like baskets. So folks would go to the changing stalls and each person would be given a basket to put their things in. So he said that was completely full. So that's 425, 50 folks right there. And he said, half that came by car already dressed in their suits. So that's at least 600 folks that were there that day in July of 1926. So it was immediately a very popular place for folks to come and enjoy. And at this newspaper, at the bottom of the image, it says "the start of the race," and it gives the names of the looks like all boys diving off the spillway there into the pond. So that's where the pond is deepest, 6 feet, and I've been told folks that took swimming lessons there, they had to be able to swim to the frog fountain and back. And I also heard that the boys did dominate the spillway, much to the chagrin of a lot of the girls. Yes. So that's just another image. This, I think, is from the 50s. And there's an image of the bathhouse. So as you know, this is I think this is the girls' side on the left and the boys' side on the right, and there were no ceilings over the changing area. And you can see a lifeguard there in this image. I've actually had the privilege of talking to a couple of lifeguards that worked at the pool. And they said it was the worst job because as there's Pickerel Brook, that babbling stream that provides such beauty to the park, runs through the ponds, or at that time, pool. And of course, streams carry leaves and tannin and gunky lalas. And unfortunately, the pool would become really tough to see people swimming, be too murky, and so it'd be a stinking hot day, and the lifeguard would have to say, "I'm sorry, it's not safe, you can't swim." So very unpopular position for the lifeguard to take. I know these images are definitely from 1929. So the park had summer programming for children in the area. And so the next photos are kind of showing what's happening in the music court area, which is part of the more formal recreational area of the park. So it says underneath this image, "All enjoy the quiet period when games are played in the beautiful music court." So I guess this is downtime. And so checkers were definitely a part of downtime. These kids are playing croquet. Now this, I don't think, was part of the children's program. This is a tug of war going on. I imagine, it seems these are all employees of the Byrd company. And it has main mill number 1 against, main mill number 2, versus floor covering. So the different departments were competing in this tug of war at the park, but it's kind of fun to see. This is back at the music court. Under this image, it says, group of school children gathered in front of the music court at Francis William Park for the health play on May 24th. So Anna Byrd, who I'll tell more about her later, she was very much involved in health and safety issues, and with Walpole, and the Walpole Women's Club focused a lot on health. So I'm guessing that this was something that she put together and the Walpole Women's Club put together. So I think this quote from John Nolan, and I have to say we're still in contact with the Byrd family. They're still very much involved with the park. But I do remind them, and I've said, yes, the Byrds have done many great things, and you employed thousands of people, but Byrd Park is your greatest legacy, in my opinion, and I think in John Nolan's too. It says, there are many records of Charles Sumner Byrd's industry, integrity, leadership, and public service, but I doubt if there is any monument that will be more enduring or that will express more beautifully his high standards and his goodwill to his neighbors and fellow citizens. Francis William Park will endure and be a testimony to the high ideals and generosity of an old-time American gentleman. I should say that the Byrds were very progressive. The Byrd Company was the first in the state and second in the country to reduce workers' hours to 8 hours a day, and without lowering pay too. So that was a beautiful thing. So I was going to go into a little bit about the Byrd family, and then we could open it up to talking about the park and sharing information that you have and any stories. So the Byrd family, this is from 1930. They had the first dirigible advertising. This actually landed in Vista Field in May of 1930. So it says underneath this image, the Neponset, which is what this dirigible was called. Am I saying that right? It's the Neponset, the first commercial airship in the country, which is on a goodwill tour through New England this summer for Byrd and Son and for Byrd and Son's dealer. So it's hard to imagine that on Vista Field, but it was. So the Byrd family, what is the first one? I have my little cheat sheet here. George. So George Byrd came over from Scotland. He landed in Maine, actually Cushing, Maine, which has been on my list to go visit. There's actually a Byrd Point in Cushing, Maine, so I intend to get there someday. So he came over. His son George is the one that started the Byrd Company. This is 1795. This is the second term of George Washington. So I think the Byrd Company closed left Walpole 1980. So that's a pretty good run for a business. So he started in Dedham, the mill. I believe that they got the contract for U.S. currency because it was a paper mill, and they produced the paper for the currency. They were known for their fine paper. So maybe, I think 1833, they buy the East Walpole Mill, which I think is where Hollingworth and Vaux is now. And his son, Francis William Byrd, also works in the business. This Francis William is known as the Sage of Walpole. He was very politically active. He ran what was called the Byrd Club in Boston, and it was a political center of Massachusetts for sure. So lots of senators, governors, other political folks would gather there regularly. And he was very good friends with Senator Charles Sumner, and that's why his son, Charles Sumner, who the benefactor of the park, was named Charles Sumner. And there is his son, Charles Sumner. So there, 3 generations anyway, right there. Now, of course, things can go wrong in a business that with so many years, and the Byrd Company was no exception. There was a fire and a flood that affected their operations. But Charles Sumner was very clever, and he changed their model. They could no longer make that fine paper, and so he came up with this rough paper that could be used for construction purposes and roofing. So you have Byrd's Neponset black building paper. So he turned that disaster into a success. He's also the one that came up with the felt back shingles, which is really a big moneymaker for the Byrd family. Charles Sumner, he ran for Massachusetts governor twice with the Progressive Party. He was very close to Theodore Roosevelt, who started the Progressive Party after he lost the nomination in his Republican Party. And this newspaper clipping shows Charles Sumner and then his kids. So there's Francis William, Charles Sumner, Edith, and Joan. And there he is campaigning in 1913. Charles Sumner, there's a lot about him that's available, but you will not find a lot of information easily available about his wife. But she was a force in her own right. She was involved deeply in women's rights. This is a list of some of her connections: the Women's City Club of Boston, the Women's Trade Union League. She was the chair of the Massachusetts Suffrage Association, so she oversaw the 1918 and 1920 women's suffrage conventions. She worked closely with Alice Stone Blackwell, that's Lucy Stone's daughter. She was involved in the League of Women's Voters. As I mentioned before, the Walpole Women's Club, where I think you remember the dental office, then the building that burnt down, the tower there that's still with the clock. Yeah, there was like the dental at the top, and there were a lot of different health issues that and programs and that they created as part of the Walpole Women's Club. And I also noted planning, because the whole Byrd family embraced that whole idea of town planning. And in fact, she had it incorporated into the curriculum of all Norfolk County schools. There was a great competition on ideas for town planning that involved thousands and thousands of students. So she was an advocate, used her Walpole Women's Club position to also advocate for that. She was the first woman delegate to the National Republican Convention, and she was the first woman to vote as part of the Electoral College. So I think it's worthy to note her contributions. This is a letter from Alice Stone Blackwell to Anna Child after she made her, participate in the Electoral College. And I'll read it to you. It's kind of a fun letter. It was very nice of you to invite me to come and see you cast your vote as a presidential elector this morning. I was there. I was glad you had been chosen. But how funny it was to see Mrs. Putnam presiding. I wonder if she did not feel a little silly, remembering all the dreadful things she used to say would happen if women took part in politics. It certainly was a joke on her, but she presided well in the main, and she made a very complimentary speech about you in proposing your name to fill the vacancy left by Mr. Byrd's illness. It is good when the aunties are willing to bury the hatchet, and very good to think we shall not have to climb that hill anymore to get women the right to vote. So women were first given the right to vote in the presidential election of 1920. So, of course, I should say not all women. It was definitely the privilege of white women to vote in 1920. It took a lot of other women many, many decades after that to get the right. I just wanted to throw that in there. The Undine, who here saw Undine? Okay. Yeah. You can still see the border of the property if you go up to that, up those stairs off Washington. They marked out the footprint of the building. So of course Francis William Byrd. So this is the namesake for the park, and I'm just going to quickly go through a little bit about him. He went to Harvard, like his daddy. And after graduating, he went to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's him in the back row, far right. And after that, he, under President Taft, he became the new appraiser of port, which I guess was a very well-paying job. But he decided to leave that after just 15 months to help the family friend, Theodore Roosevelt, in his third run for president, but this time not as a Republican, but under the Progressive Party that he started. So Francis William got married to Marjorie Phelps, and they had 3 children. They had Mary and Francis William. This would be Francis William the Fourth. And they had Anna. And what I've been told is that Francis William, he went by Billy, went in for a routine procedure or something that he wasn't sick. And he went into the hospital and he got sick at the hospital, and it was very quick, and he died. The family says it was pneumonia, but of course it was also 1918, so there was the flu epidemic, and so we think it's pneumonia, but we don't. He was 37 when he passed. And this is a letter from Theodore Roosevelt to Charles Sumner and Anna after they lost their son. And I'll read it to you. It says, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Byrd, I never met a young man whom I respected more than I did your fine son, nor any man in whom I more believed. I mourn him as a friend. I mourn him as a citizen. To you two, the calamity is without alleviation. With very real and deep sympathy, dear friends, faithfully yours, Theodore Roosevelt." Of course, he lost his own son in World War I, and I'm not sure on the timing of this, if he had already lost his son or not. This painting is in the Museum of Fine Arts. So this is Francis Williams' sister Edith and his brother Charles Sumner. Joan, I have no images of Joan except that newspaper clipping that I showed you earlier. So if anyone has, questions or maybe a, story, this photo was given to the park from a park visitor. So if you have any treasures to share about the park, we also have an archive. The trustees, it's in Sharon. It's where it was initially a hospital for, is it tuberculosis? And then it was the Whaling Museum before it went to New Bedford. And the trustees has their archives on that property, and that's where we house all the history of the different properties that the trustees oversees, which is over 126 properties across the state. So they all come with stories and history, and all of that is, or most of it is stored there. And so I would love to add anything on Byrd Park to the archives there too. So anyhow, let's open it up here, some good stories or questions. And
Is that open to the public?
the archives? Yeah, you can, it's on request, but it's, if you wanted to go and see something or research something, you just put in a request and they organize. If you can't just, show up. Yeah. Any questions or anything?
Is there a book or an electronic book which tells the story so nicely as you have done here?
So there is a book on the Byrd family you're talking about, or the park itself?
Either.
So as far as the Byrd family, there is a book on Francis William, the Sage of Walpole, and that was actually written by Julia Howe. She was involved in the suffrage. She was worked in the women's suffrage movement, and she also was famous for writing a song that is forgetting now, Battle Hymn of the Republic. And she was very close to that Francis Williams, so that would, I forget, he's second, Francis William II, the Sage of Walpole. She wrote an autobiography, a biography of him when he passed. So that is available. When Francis William, for whom the park is named, when he passed, his sister created a book for the children about him and his life. And we just actually recently, a descendant of Francis William gave us the book, and we scanned it, so that's available through the archives from the trustees. And then as far as the park, the trustees, when they take over a property, do a lot of research. So some of my information comes from the trustees' research that they did when they took over the property, but also we have a lot of correspondences between the Byrds and John Nolan. So a lot of there's a vast treasure trove of communications and information through on the creation of Byrd Park, and that actually is housed, I think, in Cornell University, and someone from the trustees went there and copied a lot of that material. So that's available at the archives too, but the bulk of it is at Cornell. So that letter that I showed you from Alice Stone Blackwell, I just came across that really in researching online. So a lot of stuff I'm just kind of pulling from different resources. The Walpole Historical Society has been a great resource for me too, as far as like Francis William the Sage of Walpole was an abolitionist, so learning about that I got from the Civil War book that the Historical Society recently, well, not so recent, a few years ago, published. There's a book called The Industrialists or something along that, of Walpole, and the Byrds are highlighted in that book as well, which you can get from the library here. It's really a hodgepodge of places, and this is sort of just a huh?
Any research is always hard.
Yes, it is. It is. And you get little, I should say that I wanted to look more deeply at this, but the Walpole Public Library has, I saw it online, and I'm sure it's available physically, the information on the park. The Conway School, which is actually going to be involved in the park this year, was also involved on a project in the park in the 80s, and they have their report, and as part of their work, they do a lot of research and compile information, and so that report is available online, which has a lot of history on the park and its usage, and details of current standing of the park. So the library actually is a great resource for a lot of information on the park and the Byrd family.
Who's currently taking care of the park now? The trustees?
The trustees,
As far as the upkeep of the park?
yes.
Do they also took over the cemetery? 'Cause it
No.
says why does it say Charles Sumner Byrd at the cemetery on Pleasant Street by the mill?
They're buried there.
Oh, but, so the trustees didn't take over the?
No, they didn't take over the cemetery.
Oh, just the park,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who takes care of the upkeep and
Yep.
that.
Anybody can become a member of the trustees. They're a great organization.
From New Hampshire, and I was one of the first lifeguards, water safety instructors, and swimming instructors at the pool. And I remember that the pool used to be cleaned weekly, and the water would be so cold you couldn't even go into it, and then it would warm up. When it got comfortable, then they would drain it and clean it. And I don't know when they put the cement surface in it, but that helped to keep it clean. But the brook always did run down from above through it and down over the dam. And if any of you grew up in East Walpole, you remember the frogs out there?
Yes.
Well, that was a big swimming target for kids who couldn't swim to be able to swim out to the frogs and back. And I also was a playground instructor there, and my whole childhood was practically spent at Byrd Park, and I lived on June Street right across from the athletic field. and that's where Byrd and Son played all their baseball games. And they also had professional players come out from Boston and put on exhibition games and things there too. So I had a pretty good childhood down there in East Walpole.
Yep.
And East Walpole now is not the East Walpole that I grew up in.
Sorry, what is your name?
Excuse me?
Your name?
I'm Natalie Coleman. At that time,
Natalie Coleman?
my maiden name was Kemp.
Na-
Maybe some of you came to the swimming pool when I was there, I don't know.
I realize I was supposed to repeat what folks are saying I forgot about the TV, so I just wanted to repeat, Natalie, what you were saying about that you were a lifeguard there and also oversaw the playground area, and that, as I mentioned before, the swimming pool was very popular, and it was a great achievement for those learning to swim to get to the frog fountain and back. And it was an issue with the brook bringing things into the swimming pool. Yes, I heard about the cleanings. So you say every 2 weeks, was it? I get mixed. Every week. So you can still see the hydrant near the pool, now pond, that they they would drain the pool and do a very strong washing of it and fill it back up. And I heard it was very, very cold, the water, and it probably just starting to warm up before they emptied it again. And right. And then with the playground, can I ask you which playground? Because the playgrounds have changed.
I was over by the
Music court.
yeah.
Okay, behind the music court.
In the
At
front, towards the field in front of it.
Okay, so where it is now, like next to the sports courts.
I haven't been in
Oh,
the
okay.
back for many years.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think they moved the music court, but there was the music court, then there was the field, then there was the tennis court. It's where I learned to play tennis, so when everybody in Walpole played tennis there, Byrd and Son used to have tennis tournaments there. They had the Walcott Avenue courts, and they had the courts over on Pleasant Street.
That's right. So they had the tennis courts. The sports courts that are there right now were all tennis courts. Right now we sort of have a tot lot, a tennis court / pickleball court, and then basketball courts. But historically those were all tennis courts.
They were all clay courts too.
Those were clay courts, and the ones at Walcott were also clay courts. And I'm not sure when the Walcott ones were taken down. Does anyone know? No, but you remember them?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You played tennis there. How many folks learned to play tennis at the park? Go ahead. Sure. Why don't you tell me, and then so they hear it on the.
Dr. Grodin, remember Dr. Grodin?
Yes.
Dr. Grodin? Do you remember? This gentleman was curious if you knew Dr. Grodin.
I remember the name, yeah.
And he had 12 children. And his wife used to have parties at the big barn there.
Did he live up by Plimpton Street?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew of him. Can't say I know him, but I did know him.
And what was his connection with the park, or is it just a?
Did you belong to the women's club?
I didn't hear you.
Did you belong to the women's club?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
What'd you say?
No, she didn't.
I was just in high school when I was down in Lifeguard and teaching swimming.
Okay.
And I transferred to the local pool later.
Okay.
But I grew up in Byrd Park. It was super, it was excellent. There weren't many places like that in the whole country, I don't believe.
You know, I love that you brought that up, because I meet a lot of people who say the exact same thing. It seems the park becomes the backyard playground for many of the kids in this area, and they of course, spend their childhood running around, enjoying the park in different ways. And there's great emotional attachment to the park because of that, which is really fabulous.
I'm 98 years old, so I saw quite a bit in Walpole.
98?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll be 98, yes.
That is,
Yeah.
so you could tell me about a thing or two about the park, I'm sure. Sorry?
Tell me, I think you called it Willow Pond, we used to call it the old frog pond, the first pond.
Yeah, the frog pond.
Is that ever used for swimming?
So the question is about what I referred to as Willow Pond, which is the one near the church,
Yes.
the Union Congregational Church. I call it Willow Pond because that's what Nolan called it on his design plan. I have heard this before. Many folks call that the frog pond, and I'm guessing because it was a fine place to see and catch frogs. And that was its intention, was to be a New England pond, which would have the frogs and turtles and all those other wonderful things. But it was never intended or used for swimming that I know of. Maybe folks decided to at some point, but it was not officially a swimming pool or a swimming area, I should say. Just the pond was intended for swimming. I mean, just the pool, sorry, where the frog fountain is, so it gets a little confusing with the frog. I refer to that swimming pool / pond doesn't have like an official name on this, so I call it the frog fountain pond now because it has the frog fountain. But gets confusing if you call Willow Pond Frog Pond.
Yeah. And when did the actual pool open?
As soon as the park, they endowed the park in 1925, and the work began then. And as I mentioned, in July of 1926, Nolan was observing how the pool was being used. So I would say 1926.
It opened as an actual swimming pool?
Mm-hmm.
How many frogs left?
The three is still down there?
It's the original fountain was just recently.
There were 3 frogs, I believe,
You are correct.
and they were all bronze.
Yep,
How many are left?
the 3. They're all part of the same. This is a question about the fountain at.
Got one that's gone.
So I did see it was stored for many years in the maintenance area of the park, and in recent years there was a number of projects that enabled us to have the opportunity to put the fountain back in, and it's not functioning as a fountain yet, but it doesn't seem like it's missing anything. I'm not sure if there was something that was attached that could be no longer there, but it seems quite whole. There didn't seem like to be anything missing when we put it back.
I think the horses used to drink water there too.
Horses used to drink water there. It's quite possible. I mean, the main entrance is on Washington Street, so right. There's That's right. So the main entrance is on Washington. You'll notice there is no parking on Washington. And that's because there were very few cars at the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if horses, were using.
Grodin, and her husband he was a doctor, and they had 13 children.
Oh, right. So did he use the park and all those children?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was there before it became a park? Was it a wooded area or a farm area or what?
It was private, different people owned property there. Oh my gosh, we talk about Willow Pond and we talk about the pond with the fountain, but there's also is a Carberry pond. So the Carberries owned like a section of that property. There were other families, I can't remember the names, but owned certain lots. The Byrds owned a section. I assume that the Byrds purchased the lots from these other private owners. There's one image. Oops. I just don't know the history of this. That's why I was reluctant to share. But there is this open area. I think the park. It's almost where that arrow.
There's a home up there that's built like a castle too.
Is it this area right here? I think that was became the park. I think. So I think there was some open areas. The brook was there. They dammed that brook to create those ponds. So the ponds weren't there before the park was built. The brook was. And what I call Willow Pond was definitely a wet area, and there were willows growing there. They like their feet wet, and so there was a row of willows growing there, and then they, did more landscaping to create the pond. So it is a built landscape, but intended to provide this spiritual uplift of nature in different habitats.
In the 60s, when I would go, the playground was at the music court. And we would actually, the picture you showed of the two kids playing checkers, I had to look closely. That could have been us. We were there all the time. And you would sign out a game. And then they would get it out of the closet in the music court or something and take it back. But I can remember going there with the quarter in our pocket to buy gimp for 3 cents a yard.
Okay, I've heard about the GIMP. So this, I'm sorry, what's your name? Pat just shared when she was growing up, and this was in the 60s, that she would go to the music court where she could, and other kids, I think, could take out some games like checkers, maybe other ones, and play on the music court. And then she would bring 25 cents so she could get some GIMP to do some GIMP work, make bracelets and whatnot. I was told there was like a gazebo or some kind of other structure that was near on the music court that people would GIMP, or is it just the court that you remember?
I just remember the court.
Just the court?
Or gazebo, yeah.
I see.
I will say, on a Saturday just recently, or a Sunday afternoon, your tennis court full of all the toys for the kids is mobbed, and the young families there. It's incredible, the usage of the park today.
I have to say, it is a very popular place, and even in the worst weather day, you will find people enjoying that park, and that's a beautiful thing. It really, what's so wonderful is that its original intention is still being honored. It still is a place for folks in Walpole and beyond to come and breathe and enjoy, and I'm always struck by the diverse ways that people do enjoy the park. You have your standard young families, like you said, that pretty much know the recreational area, and the dog walkers, but you also have the birders, or I got introduced to dwarf conifer lovers that, at the park. So there's all sorts of, in fact, I'll share a fun story. One of those dwarf conifer lovers noticed an aberration in one of our Norway spruces, which called witch's brooms. And I guess these witch's brooms have certain qualities that are more desirable than others, and this one was particularly desirable. So he asked if he could he made a cutting and tried to grow this dwarf conifer from it, and he was unsuccessful, but sent it to Conifer Kingdom out in Oregon, and there is now a cultivar called Byrd Park for this dwarf. Yeah, so it's really fun to hear how different people enjoy the park in many ways. Yeah. Owls. the question about owls. So the park does have owls. I think usually it's a great horned owl, I hear. It's possible that other owls are using it. I mean, barred owls like it a little more woody. You might need to, I don't know how vast your town forest is, but you might need to be a little more wild. Oh, near the church. Oh, the Congregational Church. Yeah. Yeah. So the great horned owls tend to make use of nests that have already been made by others. So I haven't seen the nest, but it's by the church, you're saying? Yeah. So you can. I'm always impressed. Even though it is a built like landscape, it does offer an incredible amount of wildlife, flora and fauna for all of us to enjoy, quite a diversity, and I'm always struck by that, which is, a really wonderful thing. Any other questions? Stars? Oh.
I just want to say we belong, and we're pretty much here every day. You've seen me many times. I think it's helpful for people to know that if you're going to join and pay your dues, that if you do it directly at the Byrd office, the money stays at
She is not a plant. I just want you to know, okay? But you do bring up something very important, so thank you, and I will share with you all. So the Trustees is a nonprofit that is supported through membership, and if you join or renew through the park, then those membership fees go directly to support the park. So I always tell people, if there is a property that's near and dear to their heart, a trustee's property that's near and dear to their heart, in this case, I'm hoping Byrd Park is near and dear to your heart, that you join or renew through the park. And so that basically means calling the park or mailing your membership or renewal to the park, or just dropping it in the the little plastic sleeve of the office door. Because if it gets processed through the park, then those fees go directly to the park. If you do it online, of course, it's supporting, the whole organization, which is a good thing too. But if the park is near and dear to your heart, we do encourage you to try to make that extra effort to do it through the property. So thank you for bringing that up. And I like to thank people with a Byrd Park t-shirt, which is a collector's item, just letting you know.
Who's running the benches now? Is that through?
So we did have a memorial bench program for a number of years, but there was a limit on how many benches could go into the park, and that limit has been met. So that program is no longer running.
It seems like it's a big pot. Can that out?
No, it's just how many we could put in.
I just wanted to ask on the 100 trees you were
Sure.
trying to put in, how many? We've seen a lot of the plants.
Yeah, so just last year we partnered with the Friends of Byrd Park. So they're a great citizen volunteer group that supports the park in a number of ways. And we partnered with them on a fundraiser, the Byrd Park Tree Project. And so that ran for a year, and we raised funds for the care, maintenance, and planting of new trees at the park. And our goal was to plant 100 trees. And I'm happy to say that we have already planted over 100, and we'll be planting more this spring and maybe even in the fall. So it was very successful. So thank you if you were a contributor to that. When you were mentioning the memorial bench program, I do offer the tree program as an opportunity if folks want to honor a loved one or a loved pet, to donate to that, because even though the official fundraiser has closed, the Friends are just keeping the account open, because people do want an opportunity. So a lot of people feel very connected to the park, and they want to honor a loved one that was connected to the park in some meaningful way. And of course, the trees are so special. When I think about it, I mean, as lovely as the ponds are, or the music court, or the pathways, or whatever, it's really the trees. It's really the trees that make it a very, very special place. So we'll continue to keep that account open, and when we can, we'll plant new trees with that fund.
Thank you.
Oh.
I didn't mail my membership renewal yet.
Oh, okay, great.
So just go right over there and drop it in.
And drop it in. There you go.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Where is the office?
Oh, sure. Yeah. For those who don't know where the office is, it was designed to be hidden, and they did a great job. So, yes. So, if do you know the sports courts where the tennis courts are? They face the big field, the big Vista field. So, if I had the sports courts on my right and the music court on my left, and I was walking by the courts, the path would eventually curve left, but you'll see a dirt maintenance road right around that right near that curve, and that dirt road takes you into the maintenance area. So if you go down that dirt road, you'll see immediately on your right some. It'll be marked office. Just sliding glass doors with a porch, so it kind of feels like you're going into somebody's house, but that is the office. And then there's another door to the office on the other side that has a little plastic sleeve, so you can use that for your renewal that you mentioned. Thank you.
Hopefully to get an exercise, go for a walk, and
Okay.
definitely.
Well, it seems like folks have asked all their questions, and thank you for sharing your stories, and I hope you enjoyed.